Today, I want to touch on the topic of starting a homestead in the winter. One thing I think of when starting a homestead, at least back when I did, I was in the fall, so it wasn't too far off from the winter. One thing I would recommend is if it's completely winter, super cold, you're thinking maybe I'll start it in the spring, maybe I'll start it in the fall, maybe I'll start it in the summer. Start it now. There's always something you can do to start your homestead today. And if I was starting in the winter when it's nice and cold, I would say start focusing on the food. All I would want you to do, all I would recommend is to focus on cooking from scratch. Most of us do not cook from scratch if we know how to cook at all, unfortunately. We just have gravitated to anything is more convenient. That ends up being what we go to. And one thing you can do is increase your skill set in the kitchen. So in the winter, you don't necessarily want to be outside anyway. So why not focus on the food? Start from scratch in the kitchen, cooking from scratch. So, what would you eat? If I was starting from scratch in the kitchen, focusing on the food, and I have to remind myself to do this as well, I am no different than anyone else. What I want to focus on is what we eat. What normally do we eat? What do we usually gravitate to? What is our normal, like, plan B, which becomes plan A lot, So, what would be the main meal that everybody likes? And then just start with one meal. If you are not a cook, don't know how to boil water, just start with one meal from scratch. And that is it, like just focus on one. I would say if you can do one meal a day, that would be awesome. That isn't super processed, super convenient, something that it takes a little bit to do. Not all meals have to be complicated. You don't need to get out a huge recipe book and start going down the rabbit hole of, you know, 50 million directions. Keep it simple. Make it easy. For some folks, it might be learning how to boil the perfect egg and having boiled eggs, and then taking the boiled eggs, making egg salad. There you go. You can make a sandwich. You can use it for crackers, but boiling eggs for me, that can be a challenge, but I've conquered it. So that is one thing that you can do from scratch in the kitchen in the winter to start your homestead journey. Does not have to be complicated. Maybe you like pastas. Instead of buying or creating and thinking, okay, I'm going to jump all in, and you can, but in order to make this a little more simple and easy to get into, how about you create a pasta dish that doesn't mean you have to cook the pasta from scratch? You can get all the individual ingredients and make your pasta dish. Make a lasagna, make a spaghetti with all of the ingredients, making your own sauce from all the individual ingredients. That would be from scratch. Instead of buying it from the store in a jar and having all the tomato sauce put together, which is super convenient, and you keep going, we're going to have your own tomato sauce if you love tomato sauce. So, what if you did some sort of pasta dish with the individual ingredients, but you don't necessarily have to make or grow those ingredients like the pasta? You don't have to make it, buy the pasta, buy the ingredients that go into your sauce, and then start from there. Another thing with starting a homestead in the winter, with focusing on the food, What I would recommend is all the dishes, whether you've made them from scratch or not. Here's what I would recommend. Write them down on a calendar. What do you end up eating for a day? What is your family dinner? And write that dish on a calendar. Like if you have a wall calendar where the whole family can see it, maybe you plan it, or maybe it is just oh, this is what we can have today. Write it on the calendar of what you did have. And then after a few weeks, or maybe a month or 2 months, you can look back and see what it was that you ate the most often. And what I would recommend with that is you'll see a pattern. You'll see a pattern of maybe the style of dishes or type of dishes. Like, is it a stir fry? Is it a baked dish? What does it have in common with each other? What is the most common dish that you have eaten? And what did it contain? What ingredients does it have? And what that will tell you is your kitchen garden for later. That will tell you what to grow in your garden. That will tell you that when you plant your garden, you'll actually eat the stuff you grow. Because believe it or not, we end up growing things and we're like, why did we plant that many eggplants when not everybody eats eggplant? Like there's only so much baba ganoush you can make. And, there's only so much basil before everybody's pestoed out that we can plant. So make a note of the dishes that you eat over, it could be just a week, but I would recommend doing this for a month and even all the way into almost spring and seeing what they are. Another interesting thing about that is you'll recognize through looking at the pattern of those dishes, when you go to plan your garden, not everything is that season of a crop. Like just say autumn squash soup for winter, great winter dish. Not necessarily started if you want to have your butternut squash or your fall or winter squashes. You don't need to start them in your garden as early as you think. Like not everything grows in the summer. We all think gardening is in the summer. And that is it. But you certainly can grow in every season. But when you're first starting out, start with your food. Focus on the food. Cook from scratch. See what it is that you like to eat. And maybe kind of rate what you've eaten on the calendar. Like just say you've eaten your pasta dish, but it was for convenience. Or another dish because it was like super loved. Like this is like a go-to whenever it is the quality and the flavor that you love. So maybe like give it a scale. Maybe like a one. I used to do this in recipe books, like a 4-ingredient cookbook. This was one many years ago when I was first married. My mother-in-law gave it to me. When I would do those recipes, I would rate the recipe how much we liked it. And maybe it was like 1 to 5, something super simple. And that way I knew I didn't have to remember, hey, this was awesome, or we couldn't stand this. I just basically wrote it on the recipe and I didn't have to think about it. I already rated and reviewed. Oh, so that is one thing you can do to start homesteading right now in the winter. As far as cooking from scratch, you might can find farmers that have their products and stuff in the winter, but you don't have to do that. You can go to the store, and what I would recommend is you buy in bulk a little bit. You do not have to go all out and, buy 1,000,000 pounds of flour or any of it. You just buy in bulk compared to what you're used to. And then you've already had planned, okay, these are the things I'm going to cook from scratch. These are the things you buy in bulk. Don't buy anything else besides what you are going for in bulk, unless you want a storage issue. So I would recommend buying in bulk, cooking in bulk, maybe 1 or 2 meals in bulk. I want you to do at least 1 meal a week from scratch. And then 1 or 2 meals, say within the month, in bulk. And then take that and whatever you don't eat, it could be the leftovers, it's your family, it's not like you're selling it, and freeze it. The easiest and most convenient way to store it will be freezing. Don't worry about canning. We can go to that another day. Freeze it. So just say you do some really good winter soups. Well, freeze the extra, of course, label it, put it in your baggies, and put them in the freezer. And then whenever it's a really busy day, you can just pull them out, put them in a crock pot, and let them heat up on their own. That would be the best to me. To me, it would be the best, at least. You don't have to worry about stovetop and paying attention to it as much. If you could pull something out of the freezer and you've already made it, and it's a soup, especially, and you put it in a crock pot, that is a win-win. Like busy days, that is absolutely a win. So soups are great. The other benefit of being able to cook from scratch in bulk in the winter, you heat up your house too. And I'm a little bit of a like cold, weak person. I like to be warm. So I'm not a cold fan, although I love cold weather. I love seasons, but I can't say that I would love to be cold. So cooking in bulk in winter with making larger amounts of soups or baked things, that is extra special because then I can stay warmer. Focus on the food, cooking from scratch, buying the ingredients in bulk, not a lot of bulk, just enough to do maybe like 2 meals per meal that you make, and see how it goes. Cook in bulk, freeze it, write down what you ate each day. Maybe rate them again, rate them as whether or not you loved the meal or if it was just out of convenience. Like you can get super convenient food from the store, and a lot of us do. Doesn't mean it's healthy, doesn't mean it's good for you, doesn't mean you're going to feel good after you eat it, but it was a meal and it made you not hungry anymore. And that was the point of it. So why don't you do a scale or gauge each meal, whether it was a convenient meal or a really good meal, you would do this again. And then you'll come up with the themes looking after a few weeks. And then you'll see what types of food are your base food. What kinds of food are your go-to. And we all go through a little bit of seasons. When my kids were really young, I would do the super quick things. And then as I didn't have as many things to have to watch all the time, make sure there's not someone running out in the road or anything like that, then I would have a little bit more time to take more time with cooking a meal. Although I will say, no matter who you are, no matter what season of homesteading you're in or in life, quick meals are never not done. Is that a double negative? That's probably a double negative, but you'll always have days you'll want quick meals because that is what life is. We end up wanting convenience no matter how busy we are. What else for starting your homestead journey in the winter? Focus on the food. cook from scratch, make a list of the foods that you end up eating, and notice a pattern. I would recommend you cook 2 meals in bulk and freeze the extra. And then that way you'll have your convenient food for your busy days. That will come because we all have them. That is how I would start to focus on homesteading in the winter. If you're wanting to make the most of your homemaker journey, make sure you get on the email list at thehappyhomesteadmaker.com.